Okay, I'd like to call the meeting back to order. I apologize, I lost my watch. It's 1:15. Mr. Newton, we have a question before we get going. Can you read the way that item number 9 is stated in the agenda and tell us if we can go forward as a commission reviewing this, because the committee did not give us any direction. So I just want to make sure we don't do anything out of turn here. I'd like to take action on some things because the committee didn't have time to review them, but I just want to make sure that we're not overstepping what we can do. I don't like that smile.
Well, not to rain on your parade, but the way it's worded on the agenda, I don't believe you can.
That's not what I wanted as an answer, but that's why I asked the question, because I thought I might get that answer.
So could we step through the high priority bills just so everyone's aware of them and not take action, the ones that the committee didn't get to? Or would you recommend not even stepping through the bills that the committee hasn't addressed?
You could go through them and treat that as an informational item, but you could not take any action to, as a commission, either oppose or support the bill.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay.
So just informationally, Kim, do you want to step through the ones that you had on your list that were highlighted? And I will make one announcement that we do have a telephonic meeting scheduled for April 5th. And for the members of the public who want to be involved in that, the meeting will focus on legislative issues. And so any of the public who want to be involved, it will be this room, I understand, Kim? And did you have a time for that?
I think that we reserved it for all day. So hopefully it won't take all day, but.
Okay, to be announced, but April 5th is the date for the next telephonic meeting to focus on legislative items.
Mm-hmm.
And in that meeting, we will review this list again, but we have some, at the SB 82 hearing, we were kind of given a task that we need to address at that meeting also, so we need to get that on the agenda to look at item 4 and 7 of that regulation to see what the commissioner's roles and responsibilities are. Commissioner Drew and I will be meeting with Senator Ford next week to define exactly what it was he was asking and to get clarification so we can get that agendized right and ask the proper questions of the proper people so we make sure we hit what he's after.
Kim Jolly for the record. And in the future, with this type of item, we can confer with our DAGs before we notice it. I apologize, I didn't put, or may take action on bills on their own as a commission. So we will step through the list that I noticed of just the bills that we were tracking and the BDRs that we were tracking. And did the high priority ones, I'll say, that affect wildlife. One of the first ones is AB 128. And this is a follow-up to last session's AB 167 on aquatic invasive species. It is scheduled for a work session on Tuesday. There we go. And actually, if I can, maybe I can just have Rich or Rob walk through it since they've been doing it all the time.
Deputy Director Rich Haskins. Kim, why don't you walk through it, then we can add dialogue as you go ahead and do the presentation, and we can get them up to date on what happened in committee.
So it's Assembly Bill 128, sponsored by Assemblywoman Irene Bustamante Adams. And the summary is it exempts a person from the payment of a fee for the management of aquatic invasive species under certain circumstances. And this bill is very short, so I'll read the language and then I'll kind of explain. And Section 1, NRS 488.536 is hereby amended to read as follows: except as otherwise provided in subsection 6, a person shall not operate a vessel on the waters of this state unless the person has paid to the department the aquatic invasive species fee established pursuant to subsection 4. Attach the aquatic invasive species decal issued pursuant to subsection 2 to the port side transom of the vessel so that the decal is distinctly visible. This law was established in 2011 and it was effective January 1st, 2013. And it's taken some time for the department to set up the regulations and the actual decals to go into effect. And we have, as you can see, in current NRS, starting with number 4, the fees were established in statute by the legislature. The commission shall establish by regulation an aquatic invasive species fee, which for a motorboat which is owned or operated by a person of a resident of the state must not exceed $10. For a vessel other than a motorboat which is owned or operated by a person who is a resident of the state must not exceed $5. And then the non-resident portion is C, for a motorboat which is owned or operated by a non-resident of the state must be $20. And for a vessel other than a motorboat which is owned or operated by a non-resident of the state must be $10. And then we go down here to the portion we're amending. Number 6, the provisions of this section do not apply to a person who operates a vessel on the waters of the Colorado River, Lake Mead, or Lake Mojave if, as determined by the department, the vessel is registered in Arizona and the person has paid a fee for the management of aquatic invasive species in Arizona, or B, Lake Tahoe or Topaz Lake if, as determined by the department, the vessel is registered in California and the person has paid a fee for the management of aquatic invasive species in California. And this, actually, the department and the sponsor presented an amendment at the hearing to basically change the word fee to program, and I'm going to go to Rich to go on about that, so it's a little complicated.
Deputy Director Rich Haskins, in 2011, when we provided testimony on the original bill, we talked about providing for reciprocity with boundary water states, such as California and Arizona. So it'd be Arizona on the Colorado River and California registered boaters on Tahoe and Topaz. The way the language came out, it required a decal, required people to purchase one from Nevada. And those are boundary water states that we have. We call them compact states. We have a compact with the state of Arizona and a compact with the state of California on those boundary water type issues. So what we were trying to do is allow the amendment that was proposed is a little different than this. Arizona does not have a decal program, and they do pay for their AIS program through their registration. California has just enacted legislation, and we're not quite sure how to interpret it at this point. But what we were trying to do is recognize that those states had AIS programs, aquatic invasive species program. We don't care how they're funded. But once again, this reciprocity is limited to boundary waters, and it involves that state only. So once again, Arizona on the Colorado River system, and California on Topaz and Tahoe. And it's a good neighbor type thing. It makes it a little better for our law enforcement folks. You know, there is a boundary that runs down the middle of Lake Tahoe or to one side. And so technically right now, if a California boater crosses that line, he has to have a AIS decal from Nevada. Same thing for the Arizona folks on the Colorado River. So we're just trying to clean up the language, make it a little more palatable to our neighbors. And so far, it's proceeding along nicely. So,
Any questions? No.
Any questions on that from the commission? Okay, and Kim, just in the interest of time, I'm looking at what we have left on the agenda and what we have left on this list. If we'll just hit the highlighted ones and the highlights of the highlighted ones, and then if we have questions, we can get into that.
Okay. Let's see here. All right. Let's go to SB 11. This is a department bill. and you've actually seen this already, but on behalf of the Department of Wildlife, sponsored by the Committee on Natural Resources, and it prohibits the possession of Nevada of wildlife that was acquired, hunted, or taken or transported in violation of law or regulation of another state or country. This bill, we mimicked the language that the state of Colorado uses, and other western states have similar language. This just got approved on the Senate floor, and so it should be coming to Assembly Natural Resources sometime. And moving on, how about, and then SB 82, I'm sure you're all aware, this had a hearing March 7th. The department and the commission testified neutral. Prohibits the Board of Wildlife Commissioners from authorizing the hunting of black bears. And the portion that Commissioner Robb was talking about, I believe, let me go find that for you. There it is. You said number 4, a black bear is a protected mammal. That's the first part of it that is added, and then it's renumbered. And then this is the substance of the language. The commission shall not authorize the hunting of black bears. And I believe that's it. So again, that was heard March 7th, and the next step would be for them to have a work session on the bill.
Any questions on that one? As Kim stated, we did testify on that one in the neutral position. And I'd like to thank Commissioner Drew for the timeline he put together. He spent a considerable amount of time pulling together facts and timeframes of what happened when. And Commissioner Drew's been a tremendous asset putting information together to testify, and I'd like to publicly recognize that. He's helped out a ton. Commissioner Lane?
Mr. Chairman, my understanding is part of the issue has to do with protected mammal, that was the biggest issue in terms of what does that mean. I think even the Chairman Ford asked that question. What does it actually mean if we were to pass this? And so I guess that's, kind of my question as well, is if that sentence were left out, how that would impact the legislation. Because I think that's the biggest issue, is apparently there are protected birds, but that's about the only thing that are protected currently. Is that correct, I think?
And that's all these questions, we need to have this discussion again, because that's what Senator Ford has asked us to do, and that's what we're going to be addressing on our April 5th meeting, to address those questions that Senator Ford had. So, Commissioner Drew.
Chief Bonamici may be able to add to this discussion, but I think part of the issue was that the classification of wildlife is actually defined in NAC, and the question was if there was a precedent for species being listed as protected game animal, unprotected within the NRS. And just some history on that, there was a bill, I believe it was in the 2007 session, where there was a discussion on having the NRS list the mountain lion as an unprotected species, and that did not pass. So I think there is some NRS that references birds covered under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, but I don't know that there's an NRS that identifies any one particular species by name as protected. So if it were under NAC, it could be under this commission's purview to change that classification, and I think that's where the question was.
Robb?
For the record, Robb Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. Yes, under NRS 503.610, it's the protection of bald eagles and golden eagles. So they are protected not only federally but under state statute. And then NRS 503.620 protects the birds that are listed in the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So they are protected both federally and by the state.
Rob, could maybe you just speak quickly to the NAC?
There's a provision in NRS that allows the commission, or basically states the commission shall classify wildlife in the following categories. One of them is protected, and there's an NAC that includes several protected species that have been classified as protected by the Wildlife Commission. So under that, any species out there, as long as it met the criteria, could be classified as protected by this board.
Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you. And I think that that's exactly where Senator Ford's questioning was heading is, has the black bear been reviewed with those, with that particular NAC in mind? Why does it not fit, or why would it fit, I think is what he was asking. And there were two sections of that NAC that he referenced specifically, and I think it was subsection 4 and subsection 7 were of interest. I think particularly number 4, I think, is what he was asking, is who would do that review? And Rich actually made a comment, that's usually something that's brought forward by the department. But I think that the senator is asking for a little bit, a little different approach. He's just asking a general question: why has it been reviewed under those subsections?
Any other questions, Rob, or questions on SB 82? Thank you, Rob.
Kim Jolly for the record. The next one, I guess, that you should take a look at is SB 132. I saw that a lot of the cabs took up this bill. This is Senate Bill 132. These are the sponsors, and it basically is a 365-day license for hunting and fishing licenses. However, during the hearing, the sponsor presented an amendment that it would make it only applicable to fishing licenses, and then he did some other things in the bill. However, Patrick Cates testified there to the fiscal note. There would be a large programming fiscal note for the department to enact any change to the licensing, even if it was just fishing license changes. And then there were some other issues that came up that I think Utah was a neighboring state that they've had some confusion among license holders and enforcement because each license would have a different period of validity. So I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, but.
Any questions? Commissioner Drew?
So Kim, is that headed for a work session then? Is that?
It has not been scheduled for a work session yet, but it did already have the hearing, so that would be the next step.
And what committee?
Senate Natural Resources, right?
Any other questions? Commissioner Macbeth?
What is the, what would be the underlying purpose? What is wrong with the current system, and what are they attempting to do with this? I'm at a loss to understand why you'd want to do this.
Deputy Director Rich Haskins, that was a comment that came out in testimony, is that someone had made a comment that it was a solution looking for a problem. We explained that we also have other bridge-type licenses. We have the you can buy a single-day permit, add days to it. But I guess some of the folks in particularly Clark County had approached the assemblyman on the issue that if they buy a license late in the license year, say November, it's only good till the end of February. But we try to identify that most of our fishing seasons are exactly that. They're seasonal. People fish certain times of the year, and they kept going back to, it's just not fair type thing. What the real issue is that Utah did adopt it, and we have a lot of folks in southern Nevada that fish in Utah, so they've been exposed to that now. And and thought it was a good idea, but there's a pretty substantial fiscal note that went along with it, into the hundreds of thousands of dollars to do the reprogramming and whatnot. So it's a matter of convenience for some people, but over the years, I can count on one hand the number of people that brought the issue up to me, and talking with our license office folks, we get a couple comments a year on why we don't do that, but it doesn't seem to be a significant issue from our perspective, but Assemblyman brought it forward, so.
Any other comments? All right.
All right, and I think the last one we will look at is SB 181. This is coming up for a hearing at some point. It hasn't been scheduled yet. This is, I'd say, a positive bill. Senator Kiekefer sponsoring and Assemblyman Bobzien, relates to fishing and the Nevada Special Fishing Permit. And it's pretty simple language. They're just adding for the benefit of adults with disabilities as another group that would be able to get this permit. And then they're taking away the limitation on the number of people that can participate with each group. So that hasn't been scheduled for a hearing yet, but that's coming up. So just thought you should know.
Any questions? Commissioner Drew?
Yeah, just a couple of additions so that the commission and the audience is aware of it. We do have a BDR that has not been released with language sponsored by Senator Kiekefer, which would be an anti-feeding or no feeding of wildlife bill, which we've discussed in the Bear Committee prior. And then on the back of the list, there are some joint resolutions that may interest some folks. But to be fair, I would suggest if we want to address this at our next hearing, that folks actually read each one of these because they're a lot different than bills. It's basically a resolution typically in support of some sort of action or another. So I'm not downplaying their significance, but I don't know that we need to take up time right now. If we want to discuss those at the next meeting, it'd be good for the members to take a look at those and actually read the language.
Right. There's kind of a list, AGR 2, 3, 4, 5, SJR 1, and SJR 7. So, all right. That's all I have.
Any questions? Commissioner Lane?
What about the exotics bill? Thank you.
Apologies. Thank you for bringing that up. That just came out like a couple days ago, and we were tracking that. It's SB 245, and myself and Chief Game Warden Robb Bonamici, SB, and some other people have been working with the Nevada Humane Society and their lobbyist on this bill, and so far it looks like the language that we agreed on, and I say that because the department did not want to be in the business of registering these private ownership or policing that at all. And so as far as the language stays like that, then we'll be fine with it. And it basically gives local governments the ability to enact ordinances or encourages them to enact ordinances to prohibit the private ownership of exotic animals. And from what I've heard, that they have been in contact with everyone who currently belongs to a group that owns those animals, and that they have a grandfather clause in here for them. So, and then there's a lot of exemptions. It's a very long bill, but there's a lot of exemptions for casinos and shows and things like that, and sanctuaries, but it does provide, it's a prohibition on private ownership, mainly stemming from the several incidents that have occurred throughout our state, mainly in the urban counties, but some in some of the more rural counties. So I don't know if Commissioner Lane wants to speak to it.
Mr. Chairman, I guess my only issue is I know that there was a big issue about the reptiles and the snakes. So who made the decision about which snakes? Because I see some are included and some aren't, and I'm just curious as to how that decision was made.
I'll have Chief Game Warden Bonamici come down here. And I sent this to him when I got it, but he's been at another meeting, so we haven't actually had a chance to talk about it yet, but.
For the record, Robb Bonamici, Chief Game Warden. Those decisions there were made primarily by the sponsors of the bill and so forth with regards to the snakes. We had a little bit of input. Our major emphasis on the input was with regards to mountain lions and bears, et cetera, with our concern being we didn't want to create hysteria out there by telling people that bears in the wild are dangerous or mountain lions in the wild are dangerous animals. And that's why they changed the language to reflect in captivity.
Section 4, right there, where it says dangerous wild animals means any of the following live animals held in captivity.
And this bill, we deferred to the counties a lot on because, as stated earlier, we don't have the personnel to address the issues outlined in here. And it's more of a county issue anyway. Counties already have in place, or many counties have in place, ordinances with regards to animals, quote, dangerous animals in captivity. They have caging requirements. Some will allow certain species, some won't allow, a species while another county may allow it, so forth. So it's left to the counties. The county sheriffs are comfortable with it, and it's been vetted through the Sheriffs and Chiefs Association of Nevada.
Any other questions for Rob from the commission? Okay, thank you, Rob. Any other questions about agenda item number 9? Seeing none, do you have anything you want to add, Kim? Okay, seeing none, we'll close that agenda item, move on to agenda item number 10, Commission Policy number 24, Hunting Opportunities Among Weapon and Hunter Groups, first reading, Tag Allocation and Hunt Application Committee, Chairman Jack Robb, informational and for possible action. In accordance with Commission Policy 1, the Commission will conduct first reading of amendments for Commission Policy number 24. What it comes down to, and I don't know if Bob has anything to interject here, Mr. Hoyen, but what it comes down to is the Tag Allocation Committee met, and member Rex Flowers brought to our attention in Commission Policy number 24, page 4, the hunting opportunity formula, which was developed during the Tallman lawsuit. And it was one time we called it the McKinsey formula, and then it became the modified McKinsey formula, and it's gone through multiple changes. But it's been the sportsman's recollection that we wanted to give up to 10% of the resident, or the total number of tags issued by species to non-residents. And it was based on this formula presented in the table. With the number of cow elk we're taking, our percentage of hunters in Nevada getting tags every year is going up. And we're going to exceed the 50%, which was the 10% threshold. So, you want to come up here and help me with this? You walk to the front, I think you may have something to add, and I'd like to hear what you have to say, and it might help this discussion also. So, Mr. Sefton.
I was going to wait patiently for you and let you finish, and if there was a public comment, make a public comment, but thanks for the invite. Don Sefton, Systems Consultants. Just some background, when this came up, the McKinsey formula established the percentages, but my understanding at the time was when Reed attached the provision to, I think it was a funding measure, but he attached it to another bill to require, or to allow states to basically determine their own destiny. His office made it clear to the then commission, he didn't want to see it ever go below 10%. And so there was a tacit agreement between the then commission and the person who sponsored the bill, him, or sponsored the amendment to the bill, that the state would continue to use 10%. The other issue with regard to cow elk is the antlerless species were never considered in this because they weren't considered desirable. They were typically thought of as meat hunts, and somebody would be unlikely to come out of state unless it was really convenient. I mean, if they're in Salt Lake and they wanted to come over because they had a relative in Elko or something, they might do it. And there was no worry, no pressure about the antlerless hunts to provide a similar quota for them. And there was an attempt to do it initially, and they weren't able to sell the tags, and we had a crossover draw and all that kind of stuff because of it. Because and if you look historically in Utah, where some hunts were offered as resident or non-resident tags without restriction between them, they never even approached 2.5%, much less 10%. So there just wasn't perceived to be a demand for it there. And I hope that's germane to your conversation.
Okay, thank you. So as a result of the bill, Commissioner McNinch lived through the whole Tallman lawsuit. I came in at the end of it. And I can remember Commissioner Drew providing testimony on the bill that helped us with the McKinsey formula and coming up how we were going to allocate tags that year. And so there's a few of us on the commission that were very involved in this at the beginning, but the understanding was the 10%. And now I want to stay with the 10%, but with the number of cow tags we're having and everything, we're going to bump above that, and we might get up to 13%, and that wasn't the understanding that any of us had going forward. So we need to clean this regulation up so we can have it defined as 10%, and we can go forward. So any questions by the commission? Commissioner Rain?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as long as, so we're talking in the 60-something% to get up to 13%. Personally, I don't have any issue with as long as we're getting somewhere in the realm of 2/3 resident. The problem is giving them another percent or two. I know this argument, and I read a little bit about of the minutes from some of this stuff and was talking. So much time went into developing this formula. I just really don't even want to readdress it or discuss it. It was exhaustively discussed. They came up with a reasonable compromise at the time. I don't see as anything has really changed. It's reasonable to give non-residents a slight amount more tags when residents are getting really good success rates as far as getting tags. I don't have any problem with the way it exists. I'm trying to find what the problem is.
And addressing that, one of the biggest arguments during the discussion over the adoption of the McKinsey formula was we are the only state that you cannot go buy an ungulate tag across the counter. We're the only state that is 100% draw. California, all of our bordering states, every place you can go buy an ungulate tag. We're the only citizens of any state that can't hunt every single year. And that was the rationale behind the McKinsey formula and the surveys that we asked Mr. Sefton to create in asking the question, if you are a hunter in the state of Nevada, if you apply out of state, and if you did go hunting out of state. And there was multiple steps through this process that got us to here. But, you know, in recognizing that other states' hunters get to hunt in their own state every single year, I think it's incumbent upon our commission to try to get as many Nevada hunters in the field as we can. And whether it's 1 or 2%, it's still Nevada hunters, and I want to give that opportunity. So that's my rationale for trying to get it to 10%. Commissioner McNinch.
I guess just a question, I think it's reflected in here somewhere, but have we been following the 10 through 15% allocation to non-residents religiously? I hate to bring it up, but I think that's part of what this is about, is modifying our policy to reflect really what we've been doing largely. And, it hasn't really caused us any major problems. So I'm inclined to say, we don't want to get in the habit of adjusting our policies all the time to our practices. But at the same time, that's kind of what's been happening already.
Addressing that question, Committee Members Flowers is the one that brought it up. I hadn't even kept my eye on this. I don't know if anybody in the department kept their eye on it. I don't know if Mr. Sefton kept his eye on it. But I understand you don't want to adjust policies up and down, but I don't want to ever get in the habit of not following policy. I would rather make policy accurate. If we start cherry picking what policies that we're going to go 100% of the letter of the law and which ones we're not, in my feeling is I want to adjust this only one more time and adjust it to what we all believe it was at the time we made the deal, and stick with that. I don't want to keep adjusting it, but I do want to accurately reflect our business practices with our policies. I don't want to start breaking policy. Any other questions? Seeing none from the commission, I'll take it out to public comment. Any public comment on this? Boy, this is going to go a lot faster than I thought. I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, just since this policy is open, and for the sake of consistency, I think there's a couple of hunts if you look at the table above the proposed changes. So for example, I believe we have a resident and maybe a non-resident muzzleloader antelope horns longer than the ear hunt now. That should probably be updated in the table.
Correct.
And we've also updated or added a black bear hunt for resident and non-resident illegal weapon. So just for the sake of consistency, I think those updates should also be considered. Are there any others that the department's aware of that have changed?
Any questions on that? Okay. Any public comment on what Commissioner Drew just brought up? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Anybody got a motion?
What's that?
It's the first reading, so we don't have a motion. I'm sorry about that. No further questions on this? This is the first reading, so we'll see this again tomorrow. With no questions, we'll move on to agenda item number 11, regulation workshop informational, public comment period allowed. Commission General Regulation 392 LCB file R47-11 Falconry, Program Officer Maureen Hullinger, and Chief of Wildlife Diversity Laura Richards. And I really don't know how you two are going to go after this one, because this is one of the longer ones I've seen with the most changes I've seen also. So
I've been trying to figure it out for a couple weeks.
yeah, I hope all the commissioners had a chance to review it, understand what changes are, and maybe we don't need to go through it line by line. Just if you have particular comments or concerns, we can address those. Because looking at the length of this and as many changes were made, we could spend the rest of the afternoon getting through this one item. So, Maureen?
Maureen Hullinger, Nevada Department of Wildlife License Office. I'm here to present CGR 392 R04711 for falconry, and then after that is CGR 397 04611 for raptor capture. The background on this was the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service revised their federal regulations regarding falconry and are getting out of the licensing business for falconry and are asking the states to incorporate the language at the state level for licensing. As a result, we have to bring into state law those requirements. So that's why you see before you such a lengthy regulation. The effort is required to align state regulations with the revised federal regulations, and the states have until 2014 to have their new regulations approved by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for continued licensing at the state level. So we're on a timeline. Last year, NDOW staff conducted public scoping meetings to present the draft language for review and input by the falconers. In addition, a copy of the state draft language was posted on the online site, and written comments were accepted from those who were not able to attend the meetings. Following the scoping meetings, the NDOW team of license office staff, law enforcement, and wildlife diversity began revising the draft regulations based on feedback from the falconers. Some of the major changes that you'll see included in here agreed to and based on falconer input was moving the minimum apprentice falconer age back to 12 from 14, the minimum age for general falconers from 18 to 16. NDOW incorporated the CFR banding requirements and amended the state requirements not to require all raptors to be banded. NDOW also incorporated CFR language on the species that may be possessed by apprentice falconers. Those are just some of the highlights. There was others. There was several different timeframes in the CFR in regards to reporting requirements. We standardized those to the more restrictive to 5 days because there was a mix of 10 and 5 depending on what you were doing. And to simplify it for the falconers, we made it consistent at 5 days throughout on the reporting requirements is just one other example of some changes. Last summer, we submitted the draft language to LCB after all of that input. What you submit is not necessarily what you get back, and as that, you can see that with the length of this regulation. We provided our draft in addition to the CFR, and LCB, knowing that we needed to get this incorporated, they took that on, and we then finally went out in the fall in October with what we felt was the best draft and provided that to the falconers and sent that off to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for review. We felt we needed to have them look at it before even bringing it before this body to make sure we didn't miss anything that was required. We didn't want to have you approve a regulation and then find out we missed the mark and have to come back and miss the timeframe of 2014. So with that, we got some wonderful feedback from the falconers. They went over it with a fine-tooth comb. We had great feedback from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Essentially, they had high compliments on it. We had missed a mark in a couple spots. We made those fixes and sent it back to LCB. So what you see in front of you is the final draft out of LCB, and so that we can go forward with trying to meet those federal guidelines. I'm not going to go through this section by section. I did that support material to kind of paraphrase each section. What I would like to point out is some things that we've found since the draft has come out. The first being in section 9 of CGR 392 for falconry. Wherever you saw green language in there, we found an error that was missed. So in subsection 5 of section 9, you'll see that we added the word abatement back in. It's just, we missed the term. It's the name of the permit from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and abatement is the primary term they use, so it just got left out. So we're putting that in there so it's real clear that we're consistent throughout that section as to the name of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service permit. The other correction we found was in section 14, which is on the reporting requirements, where you see the removal of department on form 3186A and to the United States. We We remove that there because what's going on is that they have to report, they're going to be required to report online and then provide us a copy of what they've reported, whereas historically it was you filled out a form and you gave us a copy of the form, and it's just the order of it is changed. They're still going to need, they've always reported to us, it's just now they report to us after they report to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. They provide us a copy of that after they've printed it off the system. So it's just a change of order on that one. Since this was published, it's also been brought to our attention that in that same area on Section 1, subsection C, where it says the falconry licensee shall report the acquisition, transfer, release, loss, rebanding, and it says implantation. The CFR actually states that they're supposed to report their microchip information, not the implantation. So I would like to recommend that we change the word implantation right there to microchip information to meet the CFR language.
Commissioner McNish.
There it is, all right. Could you go say that one more time, please?
Certainly.
It'll bog us down, but
It's in Section 1, it's Section 14, subsection 1, and if you go down to C, and there's that little arrow, it says the falconry licensee shall report the acquisition, transfer, release, loss, rebanding, and then the word implantation. CFR actually says microchip information, not implantation. So we just want to swap that out right there. The next edit that we found was in Section 26, which is the edits that take place in the established language in NAC. It's in Section 26, subsection 2, and it's where it says the department shall not issue a license or permit authorizing a person, and it says to possess. It should say possessing a raptor. This was addressed by the falconers, and the tense there was not caught before we could get this published for the meeting, and before we sent it down to LCB. So we would like to see that changed, possessing a raptor instead of to possess. This allows someone who's possibly moving into the states, a falconer, has in possession a falconry bird, but still has to build their facilities. We're not going to license them in Nevada until they get their facilities built, but we're not going to prevent them from possessing. So that was a clarification there. And those are the only other edits that we could see for the falconry regulation.
Commissioner Maureen.
Yeah, just only one question. It seems like there's a couple things that are possibly maybe a little redundant in that he's providing copies of forms to the department. I mean, they're reporting it to the Fish and Wildlife Service website. Doesn't NDA have access to that?
We actually haven't been able to see that site yet and what the reporting requirements are, but we would like a copy of the report so that we can keep their falconry license current as to what they have in possession listed on their falconry license. When they tell us, we'll update it, and we actually provide them an updated copy, an amended license, so that they always have on them in possession a corrected license for what they have in possession. So we've always been provided that, so we have a copy of it. Historically, there's been challenges for our falconers in the reporting with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, where we've actually provided documentation for them to prove that they've done what they were supposed to do. So it's a backup for them in addition, but it helps us maintain in our records and for them to have on their license what they actually have in possession.
Okay, and so that is done through a paper copy rather than sending something electronically to the department.
Correct. From what I understand with the system, they'll be able to print that report out and send it to us.
Any other questions? Commissioner McNitch?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I brought it up to Maureen and Laura just prior to sitting down, so I know they haven't had a chance to really look at it. But under Section 5, subsection 5, under A, so Section 5, subsection 5A, there's an and in there, and I was questioning why that wouldn't be an or. So I'm kind of, don't intend to put them on the spot. They might have to do a little work. They might have figured it out already, but I just want to put that out there. That was a question that I had, so.
Any other questions? Commissioner Lane?
I guess my question had to do with Section 18 on page 13, and where it talks about in number 1 about must be housed in humane and healthful conditions, and then under D, provide a healthy environment for each raptor. And 5, sufficient size to allow the raptor to fly. That's, I'm a little concerned because it sounds great, but it also sounds really nebulous. Is that the Falconer's wording, or where did that wording come from?
That's actually in CFR.
Okay, also the same thing for number 7 on under Section 18 on page 14.
In regards to the pan of water,
Yes,
that's in CFR.
thank you.
Most of what you see in blue is out of CFR on these first early pages.
Thank you.
So,
Any other questions?
I'd like to go back to Commissioner McNinch's question. I think since this is the workshop, I definitely could come back tomorrow with an answer on that to make sure we're not losing the intent on and or. To it on the spot right here is a little difficult. One thing I would like to point out, and I've learned through this process with the falconry regulation, I presented it with two regulations. One is falconry and one is raptor capture, when really it's processes within falconry. I should have presented it as one long regulation, because if you noticed in there and in my support material that there was some duplication across the two regs. And when having that identified and trying to remove it, LCB said it's too late, we referenced other sections, but in the end, it'll only be in the final codified version once. So I tried to fix that duplication you see across the two regs, but I couldn't get it done. So I apologize for that. It probably lengthened this more than it really needed to be, but I wanted to point out that, because it does add some confusion when you see it twice across the two regulations, so.
Commissioner Drew?
So just in short, Maureen, the language we have in front of us, the department is comfortable with, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is comfortable with. And I would imagine we'll hear from the falconers here in a moment, but on your end, department is comfortable with the language and Fish and Wildlife.
Yes.
Okay. Any other commission comments or questions? Seeing none, I'll take it out to the public.
For the record, my name is Corey Dalton. I'm a Nevada falconer. This is a 4-year process that we started with the Department of Wildlife, and we basically worked as much as we could with Department of Wildlife. We came to a happy medium on all the aspects. They had administration as well as law enforcement and transitional staff that were all there through this whole thing, and we came to a happy medium. This particular document went to every falconer in the state of Nevada. Once again here, well, all but like 20, and I encourage them to give any sort of response back, and for the most part, they're all happy with it. And at this point, There's also not really a whole lot that can be changed due to the 5 months left for this whole process. And I just wanted to say that, we worked really hard on it, and we just hope that it's acceptable to everybody. There was a lot of knowledge and experience that went into these regulations on both the wildlife side and the falconry side. And I think this is a nice medium ground. And it's like even Robb Bonamici brought up, if we have a major oops, we can fix it versus this is it, done deal, have a nice day. So we're good and we're happy, and we've really worked hard, and I think we're at where we need to be to get this finally done, and we can let us go about our business and not have to keep readdressing it. So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Steve Albert, and I'm just a member of the public. I did have an opportunity just to breeze through this really quick and point out a couple things, and I met with Maureen and Laura to discuss a couple little things that stuck out to me. On page 5, under, it'd be subsection 3, it says a falconry licensee shall not hack a raptor at a location from which the raptor is likely to disturb, kill, or otherwise harm any species of wildlife that has been classified as protected by the commission. That's a little too broad. You probably want to say that has been classified as protected and further classified as threatened or endangered by the commission, because that's actually what's following the classification system of the state. Protected is too broad and covers too many species. Any questions on that?
Questions? No?
It would, where it says classified as protected, and then it would say, and further classified as threatened or endangered. That would be inserted.
Steve, Laura Richards for the record. I think this really provides a little more flexibility, because basically all migratory birds are protected, and so even, a falconer would have an issue theoretically. And so this narrows it down. It gives the falconers a little more opportunity than maybe how the language is laid out right now. So I think we're agreeable to that.
Okay, thank you.
On page 9 of mine, page 9, it'd be under section 11 and then subsection 3. And again, I'm comparing what's in the Code of Federal Regulations and what it says compared to what this says, and I think just needs to be cleaned up a little bit, and I don't consider it a substantive change. And if LCB has a problem with it, then I think staff ought to talk to them about it and say, this is what the CFR says, and actually maybe LCB kind of changed it. But it should say under subsection 3 there, I would cross out the 4 and insert a capital A, and it would say a captive bred raptor must be banded with a seamless metal band, period. And then say, if the seamless metal band must be removed or it is lost, the owner of the raptor shall attach blah, 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 as it continues on. That's actually more in concert with what the Code of Federal Regulations says. All bands are not the same. If you have captive bred raptors, it's a seamless metal band. It's not the same as the little black bands that the department might still issue to people to put on the bird when they capture it. So to me, this is a clarification so that the falconer doesn't get lost in 27 pages of regulations. It's right there, consistent with what the federal law says.
Steve, could you repeat that for me, please?
I'll give it to you, too.
That would be much better.
Okay. It says capital A, captive bred raptor must be banded with a seamless metal band, period. And then it says,
Is that what it says currently? I'm not in the right section if that's the case. What section are you on again?
subsection 3 under section 11. I'm on page 9.
Okay, so the way I have it reading right now, it says, for a captive bred raptor, comma, unless the raptor is already banded, the owner of the raptor shall attach to a...
That unless the raptor is already banded, that would come out. That isn't what the CFR says. So you just strike that language.
Okay. So then, it would read, for a captive bred raptor, the owner of the raptor shall attach to the raptor a seamless?
The way it would continue on is if the seamless metal band must be removed or it is lost, then the owner of the raptor shall attach to the raptor a permanent, non-reusable, and numbered leg band which is supplied by the service.
I believe the replacement is taken care of in section 12 when it's removed or lost.
Well, when you read the CFR,